Hello and welcome to this Carveco tutorial. Doing things a little bit different, as you can see today. I'm in the Carveco workshop. It's a little bit messy, so I'm not going to show you around. What we're going to be doing today is epoxy inlays. So for the past month or so, I've been messing around with epoxy inlays, and they're quite easy to do really in regards to machining and the software side of things. The only hard part for me was that I've never used epoxy before. So there was a lot to learn on that side of things. And I'll show you some of the things that I have learned in the process of doing this. Now, I really like doing these epoxy inlays, especially when there's multiple colors involved, because when you skim the top off, it just looks absolutely fantastic and I really like it. So what we're going to start off with today is something quite basic, which is just a one coloured epoxy inlay. And here you can see an example of that. Looks really good. It's very, very easy to do. Then we're going to move on probably in the second video, and I'm going to show you how to do multiple colours like these here. And also this one here. Even though this is quite detailed, it's only 3 colours and it's not that hard to do. This was actually my first test piece. As I said, the problems that I had personally was with the epoxy, not the machining or the software side. And then if we move over to this machine here, then you see that I'm doing a really, really detailed job here. This one pretty much just about fits onto the Onefinity machine. And I think it's about 14 or maybe 15 different colors in there. And I'm not going to lie, it takes ages to do. This particular job has taken me around about a month so far. I've got one more pour to do in here, and then I can skim it off. And hopefully this will look okay, because otherwise I've wasted all that time. Now, the reason that it's taken me a month is because obviously you have to wait for the epoxy to set before you can do the next part, because you're cutting into the epoxy. So if you're doing the one epoxy job, that's fine. It will only take you a few days to do that. You need to let the epoxy cure for 24 hours and then you can finish it off. If you're doing multiple colors, then just bear in mind that you have to wait for the epoxy to dry before you can then carve into it. Now, this one's taken me a month to do purely because I'm not in the workshop every single day. I think it would have taken me probably about 2 weeks to do really. So I do actually have to do other work rather than just play around on the CNC machines. Right, so let's take a look at our first job, which is going to be just a single color epoxy inlay. So I'm going to switch to the software now. We're going to get that designed, then we're going to get onto the machine and get cutting. So let's create a new model, and I'm going to do this 16 inches wide and a height of 10 inches. That's the same sort of size that I've got for the block that's on the table. My origin is going to be set to the center and then select OK. Now, as I said before, it's relatively easy to do this. It's basically just a V carve in a design for just a one colored epoxy. Now, I actually have a design that I'd like to import into the software. I'm going to do this basically 2 or 3 different methods. The first one with the one color epoxy, I'm going to import a design that's already got lines and vectors in it. So I believe it's a PDF file with a design in it. So let me open up this folder here, and I'm just going to drag this design into the software, and it will automatically open up in the software. I'm going to press F9 just to center that a moment, and it it actually looks like a decent sort of size, so I'm not actually going to change the size of it. If I did, I can either select here the width or the height, or I can drag it using these arrows. So I'm just going to deselect it, and then I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to ungroup the vectors, and then I'm just going to delete that particular line. Now, I'm assuming that you've already watched some videos and you already know how to do pretty much basics within Carveco Maker. So this wild flora, obviously I don't want that, so I'm going to select all of that, press delete on the keyboard, and then I'm going to create my own text in there. So I'll go to the text tool over here, and I'm going to type in there, Lisa's kitchen, because I'm doing this for my wife, and I'm going to select it, and I'm going to find a font that's not drawn by a kid. So if I go down, I think it was down the bottom, I'm pretty sure it was a font called Samantha, maybe. Yes. So that's the font that I want. And as long as the spacing looks okay, that looks fine. Personally, rather than use the size option, I would rather just center that in the model. So click create, press F9, center that in the model. And then what I'm going to do is go into transform, which is here. Press Alt down on the keyboard so it keeps the center, and then just stretch it out to whatever size I like. Couple of things, if I try to machine this now, I know that I've got a few problems with this. First of all of that text is overlapping, so I've got intersection points, and I'm pretty sure there's some problems with the logo or the actual design that I brought in from elsewhere. So let me just show you what happens if I were to machine this now. So I'm going to go to toolpaths. As I said before, this is quite easy to do, and I'm going to create a V-bit carving toolpath. I'm going to press Ctrl A on the keyboard just to select everything. What's happened here is that I've been using millimeters and it's used 3 millimeters. So the maximum depth that you want to really go with these epoxy pours, I've noticed needs to be about probably about 0.1, 0.15. You don't really need to go too deep, but you don't want it to be too shallow either. The reason being is that when you seal this, the epoxy that you sealed it with will actually create a fine layer, and if it's too shallow, then there is a risk that when you surface off the top, you will actually just see that epoxy. Normally I would do this about 3 millimeters, which I believe is 0.12, so maybe 0.125, like so. And then the carving tool, click select, and then I've got some bits that I use in the workshop down here, and I've got a 60-degree V-bit. Now for something like this, I know that the vectors are not very spread out, so there isn't much width to them, so I would be better off using something smaller than 60 degrees, maybe a 30 degree or even 15 degree, but I don't actually have one, so I'm going to have to make do with a 60 degree. So click select, click the drop down, and then I'm going to keep a feed rate of 1.5 meters a minute, or 1,500 millimeters. Plunge rate, it's 1,000 at the moment. Now what I've noticed is that sometimes it plunges in quite fast, especially when you're doing multiple layers of epoxy. And I've noticed that the very tip of the V-bit is just breaking off. So I've been slowing this down quite a lot, but I'm going to take it to about 0.5 meter a minute. And then I don't really need to set up the material because it's all coming from the top, but it's going to give me a warning message. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know what the thickness of that material is, so I'm just going to type anything. So I'm going to say 1.5. Because I'm doing it off the top, it doesn't really matter. It's just I need to make sure that I don't go through the material when I machine. And I know that it's not going to because these vectors are so close together. So select OK, and then I'm going to try to click refresh. Let's see the maximum depth that this can actually get down to. It's going to give me a few error messages. Okay, vector intersections are found. I know this because I've got them on Lisa's kitchen. So it's telling me to use the vector doctor. So let's go to the vector doctor. And first thing to do, curve tolerance. Make sure that you've got that set as the same as what your tolerance is in the toolpath, because otherwise you could be fixing things that you don't really need to. So again, I've been using metric, so it's changed. So I'll put that back to 1 fem. Now, it's a good idea to leave this open as well, because if I were to close that now, I would lose all of my settings. So what I tend to do is leave that open whilst I fix things. So let's make sure that you got coincident points turned off. Don't mean a thing for this job. And all that you're interested in is vector intersections. Select identify, and you can see that I've got a few problems. Now, I knew that I had problems with the Lisa's kitchen. So what I'm going to do is draw a backwards rectangle there. First of all, you need to ungroup all. Try that again. Backwards rectangle there. And I'm going to select that one, that one, that one, and that one. And then I'm going to right click and select weld. Now if I zoom in on those circles, I haven't got any overlaps. Right, so let's select all of that again, clear the markers, identify again, and you can see that it's not showing them. Now if I zoom out, just so I can see these, I can see that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 problems. So if I select them, select remove vector loops, fix problems, it may fix a few of them for me. So clear the markers, identify again, and you can see that it has fixed some of them for me. So if I deselect that, let's fix the ones at the top here. Now I know that I've got 1, 2, and I've got a small green one down there. It's giving me a problem. So let's take a look at that one. Now, I know that that one is all to do with the tolerance. It's not actually touching, as you can see. So what's going on here is that that's too close to this line, and it's basically fooling the program. So if I just grab that, and I'm just going to drag it away from it. And let's take a look at that. So let's select all, clear the markers, identify again. You can see that it's okay now. Right, so there's 2 others. So let's zoom in here. Okay, so there's some weird thing going on there. Okay, so it seems like there's an extra bit there, so I'm just going to delete that. And then looks like there's an extra bit there, so let's delete that. So you'll get this all the time with vectors that have been imported. So they can be a little bit messy. So let's delete that. And then probably the same problem again. Now this one is actually a vector intersection. So if I select all of that, remove the vector loops, let's see whether that fixes it. No, so that hasn't fixed it. So what I'm going to do is, oh, it's a separate entity. So I can just select it and delete it. Right, so that should all be fixed. So if I select everything, clear the markers, identify, I can't see any. So I'm going to close the vector doctor and I'm going to click refresh again. It should give me a number now, hopefully. Okay, so it's telling me that this can go down 0.075. So I don't need to limit the tool because it's going less than what I want it to do anyway. So I'm just going to click calculate now. And then that's calculated the toolpath. Let's open up the V-bit carving and then I can simulate it. It would just give me a representation of what it's going to look like. And that looks pretty cool. And if I want to, I can colour that in by selecting simulation and then depth colour, select apply, and then that gives me a representation of what it's going to look like. And if I wanted to, I could choose a simulation colour, let's say light oak, just so I can see what it looks like. Now I'm just going to turn this origin point off, just so I can see a little bit better. Now one thing that is troubling me is that I haven't got that depth on this cut because the lines are so small between each other. And what I don't want to do is machine this and there are parts of it that are not perfectly flat. And then basically I could be machining to the full depth down here, this bottom left piece, and then hardly anything at the top here. So when I skim that off, I won't actually have anything here. What I'd like to do is make it go a little bit deeper, force it to go deeper. Now there are two ways that you can do this. The first way is when you set up your Z on the machine, go a bit deeper. Or what I'm going to do is go to V-bit carving, double click on it, and then I can add a start depth. So I can make it go down deeper than the 0. So if I take a look at this from the side, you can see it a little bit better. So let me turn on my vectors. Let's have a look at the 3D. And then let's take a look from the side of this. Zoom in. So you can see this is all, basically all the moves for all of these bits. Now, all of the red bits are the actual toolpath, and you can see that they all start at the top of this pink line at the top, so that's at 0. So if I were to change the start depth and maybe add, let's say 20 thou, half a millimeter, like so, and then calculate that again, you'll see that these will all drop below that pink line. So that's now half a millimeter below there. And what it means is that I can skim off the top and then I will just be at this point. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's close that and I'll take a plan view again. And I'm going to save this out for the Onefinity machine. So if I go to save toolpaths, and I've just got the one toolpath, as I said, Really easy for this. And I'm going to go down to my 150, and I'm going to normally use this no tool change millimeter one, and then I'm going to save that like so, and click save. Now time to set up the machine, set my origin point, and then get this toolpath running. So before actually cutting anything, I've had to fill the holes that were in this piece of walnut in, because otherwise the epoxy would basically just flow right through them. Now I'm going to set my 0. So I'll do the old-fashioned way, which is just using a piece of paper. And that's mainly because we have not got a touch probe, but I don't really like using them that much anyway. So I'd rather just use the good old-fashioned method, which is touching on with a piece of paper. Okay, almost there. Okay, and then I'm going to set my 0 there. I'm going to back it off like so. Okay, so that's finished machining. I wasn't expecting it to take so long. It actually took a couple of hours. That's the problem that I seem to have when importing vectors from elsewhere. You don't actually take any notice of what's actually in there. And it looked like a simple job, but it was actually taking quite a while to do because there's lots of intricate bits on all of the leaves, which you'll see in a moment. What I need to do now, quite important, is take a wire brush that I've got here and get all of the frays or all of the loose dust out of these little bits within the carve, because obviously I need to pour epoxy in there. This is what I was talking about with lots of detail in these little bits. I'm not too sure how this is going to fill with the epoxy because they're so detailed. I don't know if I'm going to actually get the detail in there, but we'll see. I think that it will be all right. Now, one of the things that I said that I had a problem with was actually sealing the carve before pouring the epoxy, because I was having the epoxy run into the grain quite a lot. And I tried many methods of doing this. I had many failed projects, which unfortunately I've actually threw away. I should have kept them to show you. I tried many different products to seal the wood prior to pouring, but a lot of the time they failed. I'm going to show you some of the examples that I tried here. Starting down at the bottom, this seemed to be the best one, which was actually using the epoxy to seal it. Then I tried shellac, which I'd seen a lot of people mention and say that it works, but I just could not get it to work. I tried 2 coats of shellac and you can see it looks absolutely awful. So didn't think much of that, to be honest with you. And then tried some completely random things to try and seal it. So one of the guys here at Carveco done all these just to see what it would do. So we've got super glue here, which actually worked quite well. The only problem was it was an absolute nightmare to put on there. And then we've got wood glue. So that seems to have bled a little bit. Maybe it's from where he didn't put it on perfectly. I'm not too sure. Then we've got some crystal clear lacquer, which with 2 or 3 layers is actually okay. The only trouble was that the lacquer that we used, it took about 12 hours to completely dry. So you might as well just use the epoxy and leave it for 24 hours. And then we've got mitre bond, which again was a bit of a nightmare to actually apply. So the best thing that I've found so far is epoxy. Now, if you've got any other ideas, then please let me know in the comments below. I also tried, if it's something that's quite quick, then you can use 5-minute epoxy, which I've got here. These take about, this one, the Gorilla one, takes about 5 hours to completely set. And this one takes about 2 hours to set. Now, the only downside with using these is that they're quite thick. So if you want to put this on like a quite small, intricate part, let's say like what I'm doing now, then what tends to happen is that you get lots of bits in the sides. So if you've got any sharp corners, you'll probably get a little bit in there. And also, you've only got 5 minutes to work with it. So for something as detailed as what I've just done, I'm not going to have the time to actually basically brush all of that onto there. So these work, but only in certain situations. On the larger piece that I've done, the Dragon one, it was great because I went a little bit too deep on one of the carves, and then I just needed to fill in just a few little bits. So I needed to just seal those little bits, and this came in really handy because otherwise I would have wasted the whole day. Now, the drawback with using them, as I said, is the corners. Now, you have to be really careful with the corners. If you take a look at this epoxy example here, you'll see parts at the end of the Y here where the black hasn't gone. And that's because it's already been filled with epoxy. And I didn't do it well enough. So what's happened there is that I poured the black onto the top of it, but because there's already epoxy there, when I skim this off, I don't get the black. So you need to be really, really careful with that. So I'm going to fill the walnut in there with some epoxy, seal it with epoxy. I'm going to not use this 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to be using the proper epoxy that I'm going to use for the finished product. And I'll explain about that when we actually come to do the pour. Make sure you put some gloves on because you don't want to get this all over you. And I've got a couple of brushes that I can just throw away. So I'm going to use my larger brush first of all. I'm just going to do a coat over the top. Now, these brushes are particularly rubbish, so they lose all their bristles. So just watch out if you're using some rubbish brushes. I need to just seal all of this in. Now, I need to be careful, as I said before, that this epoxy doesn't basically drip down and form sort of like globs in the actual carve, because otherwise when I come to put the black in there, I won't actually see the black. I'm just going to see clear epoxy when I skim it all off. Okay, so that's finally finished. It's worthwhile taking your time doing this because it will give you a better finish at the end once you've skimmed it off. Now, obviously, as I said before, this is a little bit more detailed than what I was expecting. So probably start on something a little bit simpler than this, maybe just the text, but it's exactly the same principle. So I'm going to leave this to dry now overnight, and we'll come back tomorrow, and I'm going to pour the epoxy into it. Prior to mixing this up, I need to make sure that the epoxy doesn't come over the edge of this board and then go onto the wasteboard, because the epoxy is pretty much like water. I'm just going to pour lots of liquid on the top of here and it's going to run off and it's going to go down anywhere that it can get, really. Now, I've seen lots of people using really expensive tape to do this, and I was thinking about buying some, but then I thought, yeah, I don't really want to do that. So I just use some masking tape and it seems to be okay, to be completely honest. The only time that I use any different type of tape is if I want to seal something completely so it's watertight. And then I saw someone using wrestling mat tape, which is really, really good, and it seals all of it in. And it's a little bit cheaper than some of the other tapes that I've seen. Now that that's dried, we need to mix up some epoxy and then pour it into what we've just cut out. Now, I've tried many epoxies, mainly from Amazon when I was starting out, and most of the time they weren't really that good. Don't know whether it was just me being a complete beginner at it, but until I started using this stuff, I didn't really get that many good results. So what I've been using since is the West System epoxy, and I've bought the pumps for it because what I was doing also was buying lots and lots of measuring cups, and it was costing quite a lot of money buying all these different measuring cups for just a little pour. These were quite expensive, about £15, but it saves you having to pour out exact quantities into a measuring cup. So you do one pump, and it gives you the correct ratio. So I'm going to mix up some epoxy now, and then we're going to pour it into the job that we just done. So we'll do one pump of the hardener to one of the epoxy. So I'm going to do, let's say, 2 hardener and then 2 epoxy. Maybe one more. Okay, so move those aside for the moment. And then I've got some black pigment. Now, when I started out, I was using mica powder and I wasn't really getting very good results, to be honest. I think that I was just putting too much in there. And what was happening, the epoxy wasn't really setting properly. And I didn't really like the look of it either. I liked that opaque look to the epoxies that I'd seen, the epoxy fills that I'd seen, and realised that I needed to get some pigment. So I've got this Alumilite, I think that's how you pronounce it, black pigment. So I'm going to put some in there. Now, they do actually tell you how much to put in there, but now they tell you to put 5% by weight to dye in there. I can't be bothered to measure it out, to be honest with you, so I'll just pour some in until it looks okay. So, as I said, I'm not an epoxy expert. So let's shake it up and let's pour some in there. So that should do it. And then mix it up for a couple of minutes. Now you can sort of tell when you're mixing it up whether it's actually going to be okay or not. So here I can see it's a little bit translucent, so I've just put a little bit more in. Just mix that up for a few minutes, and then we can put that into the carving that we've just done. Now it's always best to overfill these carvings because the epoxy tends to shrink. So always overfill. Okay, so let's get pouring. I've just poured this into the carve, and I just literally just poured it on and went all over the place. Now, I forgot to press record on the camera, and so I haven't got any footage of it. If only I could go back in time so you could see it. But literally all that I've done was just poured it all over there. And I've got a little bit of epoxy left, so it was a good job that I've done 3 pumps of that. What I've also need to do is now blowtorch it. For every 15 minutes, around about that, for the next hour and a half, I need to blowtorch it to remove all of the bubbles or release the bubbles that are in the epoxy. Now, the reason that I do it every 15 minutes is because all the bubbles come to the surface, and then you need to release them with the blowtorch. So just go over it very quickly. Don't linger too long in one place because otherwise you will burn the epoxy. Like so. Just do that every 15 minutes. And then what we'll do is leave it 24 hours, and then tomorrow we can skim off the top and we should pretty much have a completed piece. We're now going to skim the top of this off. What we need to do is set up our Z height to the top of here, and then it's just going to basically take it all off. So I'm going to move over. Let's say up here so you can see it. And it doesn't matter if I go a little bit deeper here or if I come off it. I'm going to have to sand it afterwards anyway. And also, we went even deeper when we created the carve, if you remember. So I'm going to come to about there. I'm going to maybe back it off by about 0.1 of a millimetre or 4 feb. And then set my Z0 there. And then I'm going to go back to my home just so I can see it, or my origin. Okay, and then this is ready to run now. So I'm quite pleased with how this has turned out, but if you look up close, you can see that there are quite a few holes in it. So I've got quite a few air bubbles in the epoxy. So how can I fix that? Well, the answer's simple: more epoxy. So I'm going to mix some clear epoxy, and I'm going to basically put a fine coat over the top of this. What that's going to do is fill in all the holes, and because it's black underneath, you're not really going to tell. Now that we've done this, I'm going to finish it with some Odies oil. So I'm going to just take some out the pot, apply it with this abrasive pad, just work it into the wood. Leave it for about an hour, and then I'm going to come back with a towel and I'm going to wipe all of the Odies oil off, and then I've got the finished product. That's how you do a one pour epoxy inlay. It's pretty easy to do. It is a little bit time consuming, I must admit, but the finished result is really, really good, as you can see here. In the next video, we're going to take a look at doing 4 colours in an epoxy inlay. So stick around, I'll see you on the next video.